Welcome back to The Book Was Better, episode 2. I'm Nickel Barry, movie critic.
And I'm Georja Malt, founder of With G Digital and a lover of literature.
And yeah, welcome to the podcast, The Book Was Better. It's a monthly podcast where Georgia and I discuss a film that has been adapted from a novel and discuss the age-old debate, what was better, the book or the film. So, as I said, episode 2. So we want to, I guess, open up firstly by saying thank you all for watching episode 1 or listening to it if you downloaded it, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, watching it on YouTube. Had a lot of fun feedback. I think we had a lot of fun doing the show. I hope you did.
Oh, no.
I'll speak for myself there, but I hope you had fun doing it as well.
I did. I will admit it was a strong start. Perhaps,
oh, God, yeah.
Perhaps too strong for me from my passion coming through.
The passion and the bias from the Harry Potter verse, I guess.
I think we picked probably the subject in the whole world I nerd out the most about.
I mean, but I feel like that gives people a good idea of who you are as a person, at least. Like, at least we didn't start with something that's like, let's do June and read 600 books of words we don't understand. So I think we started not just in a safe way, but a way that, you know.
We started with our hearts.
You know what? That's right. Our hearts, our passion. Yeah. Even though I remember saying on the show, I didn't watch Harry Potter until I was like 16.
Well, we started with my heart.
We started with George's heart. And I'd love to say episode 2, we're moving into my heart, I guess, but I do not have...
A heart
at all for the outsiders or in general. But look, thank you all for listening to the first episode, and we've been very excited leading up to this one here, which obviously we are doing, I think, what every potentially Australian student did for like year 8 English, The Outsiders. Were you pretty obviously familiar with the book, but did you ever watch the film before reading the book, other vice versa?
No, I'd actually never seen the film, and I watched it for this podcast. But
that's exciting.
Long-time lover of the book. So I went through this stage in late high school where pretty much all I read was coming-of-age stories.
Right. Okay.
Almost exclusively.
You know what? It's funny you say that because pretty much as soon as I just finished high school or like year 11, 12 and out of high school, I was almost exclusively watching coming of age movies. And I still think it's my favorite genre of film today.
It's they're just like so powerful because you almost never feel more than you do in those teenage years where you're transitioning into being your own person, you're an adult, all these things are happening. And I read The Catcher in the Rye, I remember.
Oh my God.
That was sort of like my first coming of age that
I still haven't read that.
Ever read, and I loved it. And then I read like Perks of Being a Wallflower. This book called The Diary of Adrian Mole, age 13 3/4, is really good. It's super niche. Not a lot of people have heard of it, but if you love a good coming of age. And then naturally in this path, The Outsiders came to my attention, and I just thought it was so beautifully told. I loved it. Just was obsessed.
There we go. Straight off the bat.
Reading it again for this just reminded me of what a great book it was. And it's probably been a good 10 years since I've read it.
So you didn't read it in school though, did you?
No, just for pleasure because I'm a nerd. Yes, Nick, I did recreational reading. In high school.
I was like, what's that? What's recreational reading?
Just for funsies.
I'm literally reading for this podcast. I'm like, I don't understand what recreational reading is in the slightest. And the only reason I bring it up is because obviously a mutual friend of ours, Braden, I'm sure he loves getting a little shout out on the podcast. Hello, Braden. He told us like, oh yeah, this is one we did in school. And obviously after reading it, makes complete sense. It's a very accessible book. It's the story of pony boys told in a very accessible way. And the coming of age thing is like, it's the book is appropriate enough for like a teenage audience, right? It's not crude. There's no swearing. Like it's just a little bit of violence.
It was actually when it first came out, but obviously the book was published in 1967.
Yes.
So at this time it was banned in a lot of high schools
really?
upon its original release.
I mean, that makes sense for the 60s. It seems
It's the gang violence.
I was going to say the violence would be a big part of it.
Underage smoking, underage drinking, and just this reoccurring theme of dysfunctional families and violence within families.
That's so funny how now in 2023, I'm like, oh yeah, I'd let a 10-year-old read this.
Yeah. No, well,
if I was 10, I'd be fine.
It is a part of the core curriculum now in a lot of schools for English, but I think there's still some states in the US where it's banned, but there are some strict book laws
very
over
conservative
there.
Sort of things. Yeah, you can only read the Bible.
Very
and stuff.
Fahrenheit 451.
Very Fahrenheit 451. Actually, that's a book I've read. I'm very excited to say that I read that recreationally. Yes, I understand that title. So The Outsiders, obviously 1967, like you said. What else can you let us know about the book?
Yeah, so it was written by S.E. Hinton, and not everybody initially knows that she is a woman.
Yes.
And so she decided to publish the book under her initials because she was concerned originally about male critics writing her off straight away because she was female.
1960s.
Yeah. And she was also incredibly young. So she wrote the novel when she was 16 and it was published when she was 17.
That is crazy.
And I was reading this article actually in the New York Times that said she was failing creative writing when she wrote this. And her English teacher is really pissed because she reoccurringly brought it up in interviews that this English teacher was failing her.
Good on her.
And then she's just written one of the most influential coming of age books of all time.
That's still relevant almost 60 years later. Well,
it sold almost over 14 million copies now. So it's hugely successful book, huge impact on culture. And I think, I did also read this story that it was almost kind of based on her life in ways because she was born in Oklahoma where the book is set. The book doesn't explicitly say Oklahoma, but it is Oklahoma. Okay. The movie says it's Oklahoma.
I remember the movie specifically saying,
and there was this sort of rivalry between the lower middle class and these upper class kids. And
bit of a West Side Story vibe going there.
And so she was actually more in the elite.
Interesting. Okay.
And she sort of wanted to see it from their perspective and write a story that told it from the perspective of these Greasers. So whether, whether that's just a tidbit or not, but I'm sure in Oklahoma these themes were prevalent and that she drew inspiration from her life as so many great authors do. So how did this, I don't know anything about this. How did it become a movie? How did it get to the big screen?
So famed director, Francis Ford Coppola. So obviously that's a name if you can't place it straight away. The Godfather, Apocalypse Now. He's like one of the all-time greatest directors. And there was a clamoring to make this book as a film. The movie came out in 1973, so it's 17 years after the book came out. And normally these days, and I guess as well in the 60s and 70s and the 80s, there usually was a quick turnaround with books. Like books would be optioned while they're getting written to be created in film. So everyone was kind of shocked that no one that had made this film. So Francis Ford Coppola was like, all right, I'm going to take it on. He was given the book and I'm a big fan. I'm going to turn this into a film. And he got Kathleen Rao to write the screenplay for him. And the film came out. It's like a 90-minute movie and it was met with backlash. It was met with backlash, especially from fans of the book, because it did not cover a lot of the key moments in the book. So over the years,
you're about to hear from one of them.
I was like, I feel like that's funny that we have a podcast specifically designed to talk about these quarrels. So there, and over the decades, it's had a cult following. So I first saw the film. I was working at Blockbuster at this point, and it was actually recommended to me by one of the guys who worked there. So I would have been like 16. Watched the film, and I was like, oh yeah, it's fine. I was like, it's a completely not Francis Ford Coppola's best, but it was an okay movie. I got the iconic lines, stay golden, pony boy, all that. So let's do it for Johnny. Everything like that. I remember this is where that came from. And I understood the cultural significance of it watching it because this cast, Patrick Swayze, Tom Cruise, Ralph Macchio, C. Thomas Howell, Rob Lowe.
Whatever you say about the movie, what a freaking power cast.
The cast is unbelievable in this. And it was a lot of them, this was some of their first films. Tom Cruise is one of his first movies. That's why he's in it for 2 scenes.
It's weird to see him as a background character.
It's weird to see him and with teeth before they got fixed. Bless him. But it's a defining feature on him. But the film gained a cult following over the years because people enjoyed it a lot, but it wasn't met with a lot of critical success at all. It sort of debuted to very mixed reviews critically, and then obviously the people who were a fan of the book, did not appreciate it as much. So, in response to that, Francis Ford Coppola actually released a second version of the film, which is on this 4K here, called The Complete Novel, and it's 25 extra minutes of key scenes that were filmed, but they were cut out by producers to make a shorter movie.
I did not know this existed.
So
I've never seen this.
I've watched both versions of the movie. And I will say this. If we were going to go right now, was the book better? I think the book is better than the film. But I think the complete novel will give it a run for its money because that extra 20 minutes of film fills in so many blanks about key things like the Curtis parents and you know how they died and things like that. There's a whole, and these are some of my notes later on, so I'm kind of skipping ahead, but like the whole thing with Darry trying to get custody of Ponyboy, like these are all significant moments in the story that make things like the relationships make more sense. The opening scene of the book is in the film. So it's this crazy thing. Yeah. So I'm wondering whether there was a bit of interference in 1983 before the release to be like, oh, we need like a movie that will be more accessible to teenagers who will be watching this film, whereas this restored version that is longer and needed that extra runtime, I would argue is the superior version. But there are still people who are out there who defend the 90-minute original version very, very much tooth and nail.
Well, the one thing I do have to say, which is not about the topic, it's about actually us as a podcast team. So
right.
Communication, I think, is key. And I would just like to point out that I was never alerted to the idea of the film. Well, was it my fault for not looking into it enough, clearly?
No, because I was charged with looking up the movie details, but I thought a little surprise for you would be fun.
Well, I'll be borrowing the DVD and watching, obviously, the full version.
In saying that, though, like for this show, the comparative nature should be like the original version of the movie, right?
Yeah.
So like it makes sense that a lot of people only have access to the original cut of the film. And I like the fact that it's called The Complete Novel. Like, I think that's, you know, it's an ode to him being like, this is the intention. This is the story we intended on creating in film format. And this is what it looks like. And I would argue it is better. Well, it just, like I said, it fills in so many blanks from the movie that when I read the book, I was like, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that makes sense. So, however, I will defend, there are moments in the movie that I love. As much as I don't think the 90-minute version works entirely, that last 30 minutes, I think, is some fantastic filmmaking. So we'll crack into that now. So The Outsiders, Georgia. What was your favorite moment in the book?
I feel like when you ask me this question, I never talk about something that's like a significant scene. It's like these tiny little moments that I love. And one of them is when towards the end of the novel, Ponyboy, first maybe we should just, for people listening who actually have no concept of what The Outsiders is.
That's totally on me. Yeah.
Basically so in this town in Oklahoma, we have these sort of what they call greasers who live on it's actually different between the book and the movie. So in the book, they live on the west side. Yeah. And then
the Sox live on the east side.
So they're lower middle class or lower.
They're
gang.
They're like they're a gang because that's all they have to have going for them in that sense. But they constantly refer to themselves, both book and movie, as like the poorest people in that part of their town. So the greasers are the poor guys, then the Sox are the higher.
In the movie, they say socias.
Socias, yeah.
So I always called them Sox, but is it socias?
It might be socias then, but it's I don't know what the acronym was for, but I remember they wrote in the book it's basically something to do with like the higher society, basically.
Yeah.
And just because there's nothing else to do in this town, there's just. But ultimately, that's how the greasers play it. The boys just want to go out and pick up chicks and smoke and drink and get into fights. They just have a rival gang of kids who want to do the same thing. But there's a rift that grows even more so with the gangs when there is a fatal stabbing. One night, one of the greasers, Johnny, stabs one of the socias. Bob. Bob gets it. And Ponyboy, who's our lead character, who the book is written from his first person point of view, and the film is pretty much told through his eyes. Him and Johnny have to run away and hide together because they are going to get bashed and killed. If they get caught by the socias,
or arrested by the
police. Or arrested by the police, which is probably arguably worse for those guys. So it's this sort of story where these two young kids have to grow up real quick. But there's so much subtext and other things happening because there is an array of characters. In this story.
I think what it really is at its core is it's really this diamonds in the rough. Story.
Yeah,
it really shows the humanity and the feelings of these kids that maybe just didn't have all of the opportunities but
what if, if they had the chances the Socials had, like what could have Ponyboy had done with his life?
And that leads me to one of my favorite moments in the book. So it gives you this really great idea about who Ponyboy is. So he doesn't want to fight. He's not a violent person, but he's also a little numb to it because that's how he's grown up and that's sort of just the environment
the rough
in which
older
he
brothers
lives. And there's a scene towards the end of the book where him and some friends get jumped by some Socias, and he's got this glass bottle and he smashes it and to use as a weapon, but the rumble doesn't happen and he doesn't need to. And then he starts picking up the shattered pieces of glass from the road because he doesn't want it to pop someone's tires.
Yeah.
And like that part's not in the movie,
sweet,
but it just shows like what a good person he is like at heart, but he's had to be tough and he's had to be in this.
He's a product of his surroundings. Yeah,
absolutely. So that's probably
which is unfortunate for him. Yeah,
it just really tugged at my heartstrings in the book when he did that. It was just so.
I think
sweet.
Another moment where Ponyboy gets that, you get that sort of not softer side of him, but that more what's the word I'm looking for? Like not just restrained. There's a bit more of a restrained side to him. Is the opening scene of the book where he's come out. He talks about his love for movies. He loves going to the cinema, and he's like, I'm happy going to the cinema by myself. Like a lot of my friends don't want to go to the movies, but I'm happy to go. And it's just him walking down the street as he's going home, and he's like, I know I shouldn't walk home alone, but like I feel good. And then obviously he sadly gets jumped. But it's just one of those things where like the way he talks about his happiness of being alone kind of to me was like, he is so sick of this life. He's like, that is my escape, whether it's film, whether it's like he says his walk in the park or whatever. Like there is so much more going on in his mind as opposed to, some of his brothers who are just like, I want to have sex, I want to drink, I want to fight, I want to smoke. Like and it makes it very apparent that is just a generational thing as well, because the Curtis boys, their parents are dead. And their parents, it's not revealed in the movie. I can't remember. I don't think it was revealed in the movie how they died.
I think there was a scene where Ponyboy has a dream and the train crashes.
The train crashes, that's right.
Yeah. In the book they die in a car wreck.
In a car wreck,
That's pretty much the only thing that's really said about the death. It's not
really
about...
No. It just adds a little bit of a layer of like, now he's being brought up by Darry, his older brother, who is...
Only 20 years old.
And he's been forced to grow up quick. He's working two jobs. He's trying to, battle for custody for his brothers and stuff. So he has to kind of be hard on the guys. Like, you have to pull your weight because we all have to be in this together. But there he takes it out on... Well, Ponyboy thinks he gets it taken out on him the most. He doesn't think that he has a great relationship with Darry, which is constantly disputed by everyone else. Soda Pop will jump in and be like, all of these are their real first names, by the way.
On their birth certificates.
On their birth certificates, it says Ponyboy, it says Soda Pop.
And then Daryl.
And then Daryl Jr., who then they call Darry throughout the film. And then through the book.
Not to be confused with Dally, who is another main character.
Who is Dallas, another brother. Ponyboy doesn't think he has a great relationship with Darry, but Soda Pop is the first one to be like, no, Darry loves you so much and he wants to take care of you. But Ponyboy does feel like he is treated a bit more harshly than Darry as the younger brother. And I think that as well as part of it is like he struggles being around that hostility at home that he thinks is there, but then also the hostility of just this general gang war that's going on. So that little moment at the beginning where he's like, he got to escape that is so nice.
Yeah, it is.
And then he gets beaten up.
I know. I didn't last long. I also just clarify. So there's 3 brothers, and I think you're using brother in the sense of...
The gang, yes. Sorry, there are only 3 Curtis brothers.
Three Curtis brothers, and the other brothers are the brothers of their small, intimate group.
The Graces,
The Graces group that they have. Just for someone who hasn't read it. Nick's looking in bros.
I'm very much like, these are all my brothers. But paternally, there's only 3. So
speaking about that first scene, that's probably right off the bat one of the biggest letdowns of the film.
Is not having that.
So in what the book does so well is Ponyboy comes out of the cinema, and straight away, Ponyboy's not really like the rest of his friends or relatives. He's got a brain on him. He can appreciate culture.
Yep.
He's very more sensitive in that, like that introduces him so well.
Yes.
And it also, then in the movie, he's writing in his book this story of his life, and he says, I exited the movie theater or came out of the movie theater into the light or whatever. But then he doesn't. He just walks up to Dally with Johnny and he's like, hey.
Yeah.
And you're like,
what's going on, guys? Yeah.
He's writing the intro to the story, but then visually what you see is not what's being written.
Completely different. Yeah.
It's really odd.
Yeah, I know.
Why did they do that?
I don't. I honestly can't.
I'm like, have you talked to Francis Coppola?
I called Francis Coppola the other day.
Or Frankie, as I call him.
Old Frankie boy. And I was like, what are you working on? Also, I got 100 questions about The Outsiders. I agree, because I think the weakest part of the film is that first hour, because the book is brilliant. Like it is a fantastic book, and I got so much more context and subtext for so many things. And it's kind of funny that aside from that opening scene, the book and the movie are pretty parallel with each other. But for some reason, I was like, why does the movie feel so rushed?
I think...
especially that first hour.
Yeah, I think for me the biggest difference is almost the core themes of the book and movie feel different. So for me, in the book, it really more feels like a story of three brothers.
Yes,
and
totally.
In the movie, it's more...
It's the Pony Boy story.
It's very much more about the classism, which obviously is in the book.
Yes, totally.
But it feels less personal. And
Yes.
also, I think that they focus a lot more on Pony Boy's relationship with Johnny. So that when Johnny, spoiler, dies, the audience is more likely to feel it, which you still do in the book.
Oh, totally, because...
But I mean, they just didn't have time to do it all.
But the worst thing is they did. They do it in the complete novel. Like that's the thing. Like in the extended cut of the film, there is so much more context that in just in those little moments and scenes that they've put in. Because the last half hour of the extended version is relatively untouched. Like it's pretty similar. But I just didn't like how rushed the first hour of the movie was, going straight from like that opening credits bit. Also Stevie Wonder, classic, Stay Gold. What a great song. But when I'm watching that first hour and it's Johnny, Pony Boy, and Dally just kind of like they're going to the drive-in, but we see their journey there and they're like chasing like little kids around, and that's super quick. And then all of a sudden at the drive-in, then at the drive-in we get like a brief shot of Sherry and her boyfriend sort of having that first little tiff.
Not enough though. Not enough. I didn't understand what was happening, and I'd read the book, so I knew exactly what was happening.
Exactly, right? So that's what I mean. It's a passing shot that then goes, they sit down, and then all of a sudden Sherry and her friend sits down in front of them, and Dally starts his flirting, because I didn't realize the whole reason they wanted to go to the drive-in, which is said in the book, is Dally's like, I just want to go pick up some chicks. Who wants to go? And, you know, Soda Pop and Steve are like, we got to work. Darry's like, I got to work.
My 50 jobs to support this family.
I was like, I'll just pick one of them and go to fund this whole family. And Johnny and Pony Boy are sort of just like, they tag along auxiliary, right? They're like weren't invited, but they're the younger, can come. Yeah.
They're like the younger kids of the gang.
Totally.
So they look up to the older boys.
Totally.
As well.
And they want to go through. And the whole point though is Dally just wants to pick up chicks, and he's not good at it in the book or the film. In fact, he's quite misogynistic, and I
was scared for Cherry. Downright scared.
I tell you what, Matt Dillon is brilliant as Dallas in the film. He is so good.
Big difference between the character. Obviously, he's meant to have white blonde hair.
Yes, Matt Dillon has the black hair.
But I think they did that visually to better help
the
define,
look?
like they're the Greases, the dark hair, the leather jackets.
A fun little tidbit that I read about the movie as well is that in the book we know that Dally was in New York and he'd been in prison, and that's sort of one of those things that Pony Boy's like, that's kind of cool, but that also worries me about being around Dally.
Yeah, he's got a good head on him.
So Francis Ford Coppola said to Matt Dillon, he's like, would you like to spend a night in prison to know what it's like? And he said, no, Francis, how about you spend a night in prison? So this is like 25-year-old Matt Dillon being like to one of the greatest directors of all time, who'd already done The Godfather at this point, no, I'm not doing what you say right now because that's absurd.
That's hilarious.
Which I thought was great.
I did not know that. That's so funny.
I think Matt Dillon's brilliant as Dallas in the film.
He does a great job, yeah.
Brilliant film. A brilliant role in the film. But the book, that whole scene in the book at the drive-in is fantastic because the dialogue in the film is delivered with such speed and such heavy accents. It is easy to miss stuff. It is easy to miss key and crucial points of dialogue that are written in the book that I go, oh, that makes sense as to why like Ponyboy has doubts as to whether Sherry likes him or not. Because obviously Ponyboy is head over heels with this girl, Sherry, who just, is a lovely lady, who's very, once she's got rid of her boyfriend, once Dally goes away, she's like, well, Johnny and Ponyboy want you to protect us from the, it makes them feel good for being younger. Then obviously that younger age, the age gap slightly between them is, the classic younger boy being infatuated with a girl older than him and stuff. So that's really well explained in the book. In the movie, happens a bit too quick, even though that's arguably one of the longest scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
Like we say at the drive-in a fair bit.
Yeah, yep.
In there.
I think that is it Diane Lane who
It is Diane Lane,
I
yes.
thought she did a great job.
I think she's great as Sherry. I actually think which obviously I read as Cherry in the book and I was like, wait a second, what's it? No, but it's Sherry is how they pronounce it in the...
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I thought her name was Cheryl and they call her Cherry because of her hair.
But I read it as... They call her Sherry, or maybe they call her Cheryl. This is what I mean. The dialogue, I was like...
it's hard to
hear.
I don't know.
Maybe I'm just deaf.
Anyway,
I don't know.
Cherry or Sherry, you decide.
Leave it in the comments. Put the Spotify poll will be Cherry or Sherry, and we'll spell them the exact same. And you can figure out how which one is which.
As we've decided, communication is one of our key.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing I think the book... actually, sorry. This is one of the things I think the movie did better than the book. I understood Johnny's home situation a bit better than in the movie than the book. For some reason, that one scene is all I needed of like his parents yelling so much and like the idea like he would rather just go into and sleep in a park all night and smoke with Ponyboy. I was like, that visual helped me a bit more than what I got in the book. I think they have equal context. Like one doesn't really explain it more than the other. But I think that's a big theme, especially with the movie. A lot of the physicality in the book is very well portrayed in the film, either fights or that domestic violence situation. And the church burning scene we'll talk about. I think I got a bit more out of that in the movie than the book.
Yeah, I can see what you mean. Like the visuals help. I think that maybe they left it a little bit too late though, because Johnny does have one line where he says that at least I like when my dad's hitting me because at least he knows I'm there.
Yeah,
but I feel like that does come
so rough.
Oh, it's
oh my
so
god, poor
sad.
Johnny.
But also, I think something that they didn't go over with Johnny enough was the fact that previously, before we come into the story, he's been brutally jumped by some socials.
That's right, yeah.
So they were wearing rings. They was like 5 against 1 and he's 16, but he's small
hammered.
for 16. It's Ralph Macchio, the Karate Kid.
Man, he's so good. He was 20 years old when they filmed this movie.
He looks so
He is so baby. And C. Thomas Howell, who plays Ponyboy, it was 15. And they look exactly the same age. So on you, Ralph. But like... got the fountain of youth genes, but
yeah, I feel like just in the movie they didn't make it super clear that had happened. Like it's mentioned, but so fleetingly that you could miss it.
The book hammers down about any time that there's a confrontation. Johnny is the first one to get shaky and jumpy. He's always like looking over his shoulder and stuff because of how brutally he was beaten. So when the scene comes to after they decide, Ponyboy and Johnny's like I don't want to stay at home. My parents are fighting. They would rather sleep in a park. They'll just smoke a pack of cigarettes and sleep in the park together. They're on the way home, and then 5 socials come up to them. Bob being one of them, who is the one who ends up getting fatally stabbed. And that row in the book, I think, for me, happened too quickly based on what I saw in the film. So that's where I think the film gets the physical moments really well. Obviously, I can see why it's a bit harder to like explain. Maybe not explain.
It's from Ponyboy's perspective, and Ponyboy's being drowned in a fountain.
He was getting drowned.
So
that's
you
very
really
true. That's true.
But I agree with you because you get to see like how rough it was, and seeing these huge boys packs against them.
That tense build up when the cars approached them in the park. I was like, oh, this is terrifying for these guys. And then seeing Ponyboy getting drowned is a long time as well. Like they really, and then him coming to, and Johnny is sitting there and he's got his bloody blade and he's like, he's dead.
Something I will say that I noticed though was in the book, it was really like they weren't bringing Ponyboy out of the water. He was
No,
underwater.
he was under.
And
He passed
was like,
out
I'm
under the
gonna
water.
drown.
Yeah.
But in the movie, there was more bringing him out of
up
the
and
water.
down, up
And it
down,
almost
yeah.
like for me made it seem like less urgent for Johnny to stab.
Yes, right. Okay. No, I get that
But I
because
think-
the book does make it feel like Ponyboy is going to die. Just the way that Hinton describes how he is like seeing red
Red.
ultimately after that. Yeah.
And I just,
Which is terrifying.
but I think part of it comes from Johnny's being attacked. He's
Right.
so like nervous that
that makes a lot of
makes
sense,
a rash
yeah.
decision from panic and fear.
Yes.
And I mean, it was 2 against 5.
And the book does a good job of building that panic and fear up. So, yeah, there we go. All right.
So that was something I noticed different. And something that we did skip was Ponyboy did go home in between these events.
yes.
And so because he fell asleep with Johnny in the park,
Yep.
his brothers didn't know where he was.
Where he was, yeah.
So Soda Pop and Daryl
Bless him.
were waiting up and Daryl's flipping out. He's
And
like,
yeah, this is the first time we see Daryl in the film.
he's like, you know, Ponyboy, where have you been? I
Yep.
was so worried about you. And Ponyboy's just kind of like, you never give Soda Pop a hard time. Like Ponyboy really thinks Daryl's against him.
Really thinks he hates him.
And because he went from being his older brother he could josh around with to trying to be his dad
To being-
at 20 with
yeah.
a lot of burdens on his shoulder.
Totally,
And
totally.
also something the movie doesn't do very well is talk about how smart Ponyboy is. So Ponyboy gets A's
Yes. Yeah,
and
yeah,
he's
yeah.
a track star.
Yep.
So Ponyboy is actually a very high achiever in school.
Yeah.
So Daryl wants him to
To
make
continue
something
that.
of
Yeah,
himself.
totally. It's love through like,
strict love. Like
strict love. Yeah.
What's the
It's-
saying? Anyway.
I don't- yeah.
Strict love.
I don't know.
New
You
saying.
get strict loved. Yeah. Strict loved your kids.
But yeah, so I think, you know, when Ponyboy's out till 2 a.m.,
Totally.
he's
it's-
obviously freaking out. And
Yes, yeah.
Ponyboy's a bit sassy.
Yeah, he doesn't mind giving a bit of lip back. Yeah.
In the book, Daryl does slap him.
Yeah.
But in the movie,
He
it looks like
pushes-
more of a shove.
It's like a shove and a push. Whereas I think the slap is a lot more intimate. I think the slap feels like more of a power thing rather than just an aggressive spur of the moment push. Like the slap feels like a listen to me, I am in charge of you. Whereas the push is like Darry unable to express in words, so it just comes out in
Yeah.
push.
It's more
which-
forgivable too, a push.
It's a bit
though.
more forgivable, yeah,
Like
totally.
The slap's pretty brutal.
The slap's very 60s though.
Yeah,
in fairness
that's true.
as well.
It was, yeah.
But in the movie, that's the first time we see Patrick Swayze as Darry, and he's like hidden in shadows and darkness and stuff as well. So I was like, who's this guy? Oh yeah, it's Darry again. And so, I mean, for someone of Patrick Swayze's caliber, utilize him a lot more in the film, please. So, because he pops up in the book way earlier.
I think the person who gets ripped off the most in this whole
Yeah.
situation is Soda Pop.
Yeah, I know.
Because
Rob Lowe.
in the books,
He's-
Ponyboy idolizes
him.
Soda Pop.
Yep.
Soda Pop is, in Ponyboy's eyes,
Yep.
the best person on this world.
Totally. Yeah.
Loves him.
Loves him.
Everyone loves Soda Pop. He, you know, and he has his own separate issues going on
Yep.
in the book because he has this girlfriend, Sandy, who he really loves.
Right. Yeah.
But she finds out she's pregnant and has to go live in Florida, as you do in the
As- hey,
60s. And
you
her
move to
parents,
Florida.
her parents won't let her marry Soda Pop because
Yep.
he's a dropout greaser. He
Works
doesn't
at the gas station with Steve. They just sort of, yeah.
He doesn't have the brains that Daryl and Ponyboy have, but he has the charisma.
Oh yeah, and
He's got
even
the
in the
charm.
film they go like, he is the charming and you know he's wearing the sleeveless denim shirt.
Yeah.
You know he's probably the most attractive out of all the brothers, sort of thing. So yeah,
That's the thing. Their looks are so talked about in the book. I mean, a
Yes.
17-year-old girl wrote it, so maybe
Totally.
she loved the idea of having these 3 outrageously
Outrageously
gorgeous
attractive.
brothers who are, you know.
Hey, if you're gonna write what you know, chuck a little fantasy in there too. I
You know,
guess.
in the movie, after the stabbing happens,
Yes.
and they have to go into disguise. Ponyboy has to cut his hair, which means a
yeah.
lot to greasers, and he has to dye it.
Dye it
and in
blonde,
the
yeah.
book, he's so upset because he thinks his hair is the most similar thing he has to,
to
Soda Pop.
Yeah, that's
And you know,
right.
all of that, you don't get any of that. Like Soda
Not in the
Pop
film, no.
feels just such a distant character.
Soda Pop is a distant character in the film, and then especially when it comes to that hair scene in the movie, it feels more like this goes against Greaser stuff rather
Yeah.
than like you said, that association he has with Soda Pop and wanting to
Yeah.
be more like him.
Yeah, and it looking tough, not
not-
TOUGH.
TUFF tough. Two different meanings, as Hinton describes to us. Which I was like, okay, that's
Yeah.
again adding a lot more context to this world.
They just sort of try to say it like when Ralph Macchio says it in the movie.
Yeah.
He sort of goes, tough.
Yeah. It's that real
Not
F
tough.
emphasis. Tough.
There's a difference, audience.
And I mean, hey, again, Ralph Macchio, fantastic. Actually, everyone in this movie is pretty damn great. You have to admit, even like an ensemble cast of like people who, a lot of them, it's like some of their first movies. They're all pretty damn good, even with their limited time. So I guess going on from that, we've talked a bit about like some of our favorite and weaker parts of the movies. One of my favorite parts in the book pretty much follows the stabbing when they have to run away on a train and then he gets told to go to this old abandoned church.
Which Dally helps them with.
Yes, yeah. Oh, that's why they go visit Dally, who gives them a gun.
A heater, as they call it.
A heater, as they call it. A loaded heater. And a bit of money to buy food. And he's pretty much like, buy food, like go to the church in the morning, buy food, stay away from everyone. We'll come and help you
once the
out.
heat's died down and because they have murdered someone. So
they have killed someone and then the police will be after him and the socialists will be after him too. And then we get the moment, I did love this moment in the movie, is when Ponyboy wakes up the next morning and he sees Darry cooking for him in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And I was like, he's like, I would do anything right now to be there. And that to me, I was like, that breaks down that little barrier of, okay, no, this is what Darry would be doing for me right now if he was here. And I love that moment in the film. I think it's a very sweet, touching moment.
And the brothers do like all cook breakfast for each other and help clean up. And they love, there is a chocolate cake reference in the movie, but not as much as
the book.
Like in the book, all three brothers love chocolate cake for breakfast with like so eggs funny, and like, it's like such a random thing, but it's so sweet.
It's super, super quick in the film because it's when they come back, Ponyboy's cooking the eggs for them. And I think there is the reference to chocolate cake. That's right.
But yeah. Anyway, so they've sadly had to escape and go live in this church, which is rough.
The abandoned church is not fun.
Sleeping on the hard cold ground, eating bologna sandwiches.
That's because they go. That's why he's like, I bought enough bologna for a week. I bought enough bread for a week. But he also bought Gone with the Wind, and they
cancelled now. But
cancelled. Yeah, a little
not in the 60s.
Not in the 60s. Still alive and thriving. Different times. Yeah. And that's another sweet moment because Johnny bought it because he was like, I thought we can read this to each other. Like, we're going to have to pass all this time. Like, let's, this is, I know you love the film, so let's read the book together. And so, really
Ponyboy reads it out loud to him because I don't think Johnny's the best reader, but Ponyboy, reads smart, it out loud to him. And I actually do like in the movie the montage at the church. I think it captures the essence of what they did there. It's really just playing cards, waiting, trying to come to terms with what they did and also not think about it.
The book gives you the time frame, which is good. Obviously, the movie doesn't really give you. I think there's a line of dialogue that hasn't been there for like 5 days or something, but the book is good at explaining it. I think the movie is fantastic at showing. Like you said, that montage is brilliant. But they have to go away because they're running out of supplies. And when they come back, the church is on fire.
Yeah. Oh, Dally comes to get them.
Dally comes to get them. That's right.
Yeah, takes them for lunch, and then they come back.
And then they come back, and then
there's been a school excursion
to this abandoned
church. And
do you remember those excursions when you went to school?
I loved going to an abandoned church.
I loved it. And then I'm sure one of the rat kids set it on fire.
Well, they think that they did with their cigarettes.
That's right.
So it's never confirmed, but they think that they've left a cigarette alight because there is a scene that alludes to this in the movie where Johnny drops his lit cigarette and Ponyboy says, "Be careful with your cigarettes."
Yeah.
The fact that they went away and it somehow happened when these kids were playing in the church is all just really rotten luck.
It's one of those things where it's like, how could this happen to me? But I will say that I felt that more in the movie because obviously I watched the movie before reading the book. And when I watched the movie, even though I had seen it, it had been so long, I didn't remember a lot. When they came back, I literally went, what the hell? I was like, how is this church on fire?
Yeah, it was a bit random.
and then they're like, there might be kids in there. So Ponyboy and Johnny, more so Johnny, is like, we got to go save them.
I think Ponyboy jumps in first and Johnny follows though.
Yeah, in the movie, because in the movie it's Johnny who throws to get inside.
He does, yeah, he helps.
Yeah, so I'm sitting there going, what is going on? However, it's my favorite scene in the book. I think the way Hinton writes the absolute chaos of the situation made me feel really uneasy. I was like, don't go into the fire. Whereas when I was watching the movie, I was like, why are you going into the fire? Like it was more of a don't do that. Whereas the urgency of having to rescue the people, I felt a lot more in the book. And it did Hinton did a great job of explaining how much this fire messed Johnny up, because he breaks his back.
A beam that's on fire falls and breaks his back. Severely burns him.
And it's awful. Like in the book, I'm reading it. I'm like, this is dreadful.
I'm getting so emotional.
No. Oh, and this
He's
is just
such a sweetheart.
This is just the start of the emotions.
Johnny never says a word. He's like a quiet boy who's never had love from his parents.
Yeah.
He's just an absolute sweetheart.
And Ralph Macchio plays him so well.
Oh, he does. And it's like he's the little brother of the group, which the movie doesn't talk about that much. But he will, like when we were talking earlier about flashing back to the drive-in when Dally is sort of like accosting Cherry. Johnny, who never says anything, says, leave her alone.
Leave her
Dally.
alone. That's right. Yeah.
And so he has
Why
a
didn't
really
you beat
good
it? Yeah.
moral compass. And the book does a good part of showing that about Johnny, and also he's just so endearing, which Ralph does do a good job.
He does a fantastic job.
Anyway, they do save the kids.
They do, but unfortunately at the cost of...
Yeah, they're all
because Dally ends up coming...
to get
Johnny out of there. Yeah, that's right, to carry him out. So...
They wake up in hospital. Yeah. And suddenly they're heroes.
Yeah, everyone, that's it.
They're in the newspaper. Greece has turned heroes, save the lives of these kids. But yeah, Johnny is not
Johnny's not
good.
In a good
He's
position.
alive, but he's not.
He's not good. Obviously word gets out that Ponyboy and Johnny have returned. And to the socias. And the rumble is coming. There is
an interesting scene which I thought was better in the book between Bob's best friend, whose name eludes me. What is his name? But he talks to Ponyboy and he says, "I'm not doing the rumble." I love
that scene in the book.
But the movie I think the cast wasn't great. I just didn't feel his emotion in the movie.
I agree. I think in the book when I read, I'm trying to think of this guy's name. I've probably written it down somewhere, to be honest. Randy.
Old Randy.
He pretty much says to Ponyboy that firstly that Randy doesn't want to do it, but he's like, Ponyboy shouldn't go. He's like, don't go to the rumble. But in the book, it's so the dialogue is perfect.
It's amazing because he basically says, like, Ponyboy, what's the point? Because if the Greasers fight the Socias, even if you win, you don't win. You'll still be at the bottom where you've always been, and we'll still be better off. And what is all this pointless violence for? And he also says something in the movie and the book, and he says, I wouldn't have gone in and saved the kids.
Yeah.
And I think what Ponyboy did really woke him up, that just because Greasers are poorer doesn't mean that they're less people. In fact, some of them are better than him.
Yeah.
And I think it was a big wake-up call.
Oh, God.
And it is funny to pose the question to yourself, like, do you think you would go in?
Exactly. It's a time and place thing, isn't it? Like, it's hard to put myself there because, like, I've never been in a situation where I've had to heroically save someone by putting my own life in danger. Like, you help people, but you kind of, you always think about what you would do.
Yeah, me and my boyfriend were having a big chat. He wasn't really sure either, but it's easy to say, yeah, of course I would.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
I mean, like one time I was like in Japan and we were snorkeling and this tourist who couldn't swim got caught in a rip and she got dragged really far out and I just started swimming.
Because it's just an instinctual reaction, But you're a confident enough swimmer.
But I'm also a strong swimmer.
Yeah, so that's it.
I'm not saying that in every situation I'd be brave enough. I think it would depend on the situation.
The comfortability of your surroundings there. Yeah, no, totally. I think it's a time and a place thing. It's absolutely a time and a place thing. Like... And the other thing is, like, it's so hard to think about these things sitting here at a desk, calmly talking about
safe behind the
mics. Whereas, like, the adrenaline is a whole different story. Like, you think about the adrenaline that Ponyboy and Johnny would have had when they were throwing that stone into the church and like wanting to go in. Like, it completely eradicates a lot of thought process. You go into a survival mode ultimately. Yeah.
And when so it's so Randy bails on the fight.
Randy bails. Little bitch boy Randy, sorry. Just putting that out there.
Should have fought for the Greasers.
I mean, in the end, he definitely should have fought for the Greasers. And we get a few scenes then that come back with who we haven't even mentioned yet, Two-Bit, who's played by Emilio Estevez.
The lighthearted humour of the...
of old Two-Bit there. who they go and visit Dallas, and they visit Johnny first, and they go visit Dallas, which, fun little fact, the nurse who looks after Dallas is Essie Hinton.
No.
Yeah, she has a cameo in the film as Dally's nurse.
Almost as good as Stephanie Meyer's cameo where she gets at the wedding.
Almost as good as Anna Todd's in After. It's the second After movie. Which
Listen to our After podcast.
Oh my God, yeah. I'll put that in the show notes. If you want a really detailed breakdown of that book and movie series, which may pop up on this show one day, dear Lord. But yeah, Essie Hinton is in there. But the severity of Johnny's situation sort of slowly starts dawning on everyone
that he's not going to
make it. Whereas the complete opposite in the book and the film is Dally's like, I can't wait to get out of here. Like, let's rumble.
He's just got a burnt arm.
He's got a burnt arm. He's smoking cigarettes in the hospital, and he's like, but he doesn't understand the severity of Johnny's situation. So where everyone's a little bit more tender about it, he's like, let's go to the rumble. Let's destroy these guys. Like, we got to stick up for what we do.
He's in denial because in the book, he loves Johnny.
Yeah.
He's rough, but he loves
Johnny.
In the movie, I don't think they do as good of a job at the start of developing it. In the end, you can see how distressed he is.
Oh, well, yeah,
But yeah, in the book, I think
the book does a great job of
better.
him being like, Johnny's going to be fine. We'll come back after the rumble. We'll tell him that we won.
The visual of Johnny in hospital is a lot to look at because obviously he's
so
got burnt back, so he's lying with his head through this.
And because,
and he's just so burnt. And
Ralph Macchio's ability to do that sort of strained voice box voice as well is just like, and because it's a kid. Like, you're watching this kid who saved all these children.
When Ponyboy, oh my God.
No, it's sad.
When Ponyboy comes in and Johnny goes, it was worth saving those kids, Ponyboy. Their lives are worth more than mine.
Oh, man, yeah.
Like,
God damn it. That whole,
It's so sad.
So that's my favorite. I think that's my favorite part of the movie is there's about 3 parts of the movie that I favorite, and all of them involve Johnny. It is that initial speech that he gives to Ponyboy about saying their lives are worth more than mine. Johnny's actual death, as sad as it is brilliant in the film. And then when Ponyboy reads the letter from Johnny at the end. So they're my favorite parts of the movie. But that whole lead up to, because they go back to Dally, and then they come back to Johnny one more time.
Yeah, the last part happens so quickly.
Yeah.
So they leave Dally a knife.
That's right.
Which Dally uses, which is a whole different story of how Two-Bit got this knife in the book that's not mentioned in the movie. I can see why they cut it, but it was still funny to read about in the book. Anyway, so then Dally escapes and comes to the rumble. They have the rumble. They win.
Yeah.
In the movie, they don't show this, but in the book, Ponyboy is not well.
No,
he's
that's
crashing.
Right.
He's got a fever. He's
very sick. Yeah. He's very ill.
He's very ill. Anyway, so they do the rumble. Then Dally and Ponyboy go back to the hospital to tell Johnny that they won the rumble. Yeah. But Johnny's goodbye.
He's seeing you later.
This is where we get the most iconic line.
Stay golden, Ponyboy.
Yeah. Which is a reference to a poem by Robert Frost that they talked about earlier, and we're trying to kind of understand.
Yeah.
And essentially it just, Ponyboy doesn't really understand what stay gold means in the moment, but then, as you said, he gets left. Johnny leaves him a copy of Gone with the Wind with a letter inside. So something that I think was good in the book that they just left out of the movie completely was the trial. Was that in the extended version?
No.
So there's actually a trial.
Yeah.
There's this phase where Ponyboy's ill. He has this idea that he killed Bob, not Johnny. He's certain.
Right.
He's like, I killed him, not Johnny. And he's got to go into court.
Yes.
And when I was reading it, I was thinking, oh my God, Ponyboy, do not say that you killed him. Like, Johnny's dead anyway.
It's like one of those things where you kind of go, what's the best of the bad situation right now? Yeah.
He's not physically or mentally well at this point, Ponyboy, but
he's been through a lot.
Essentially, him being a hero and Johnny dying, he was never in for the murder of Bob. Because totally. Cherry Valance said that they were looking for a fight. That they had Randy as a testimony. So it was pretty clear that the action was self-defense.
Yes, totally. Yeah.
So pretty much what the trial then comes down to is whether it's fit for him to stay with Darry as a guardian. And Ponyboy sort of talks about the good grades he gets, how he loves living with his brothers. It all sort of and then that sort of feels like a neater, more meaningful ending to me because Darry gets to keep custody. Because them going to a boys' home is a much bigger fear in the book than the movie, I think.
Yeah, totally, absolutely. Because like the boys' home's only brought up. It's brought up
once or maybe twice.
It's when they're cooking the eggs. Like at that bit, it's like he's like, oh, when they're reading the paper and it says the Greece that they're heroes. And that's the thing with the movie in that last half hour is that I love the last half hour of this movie because I think, like you were saying earlier, the book is more about the three brothers, whereas like the movie is about this situation of classism and like what Oklahoma was like this time. And I think the original version of the film does a good job of at least focusing in on that because we get the hospital scenes, the rumble, Johnny dying, the aftermath of the rumble, especially with Dally and stuff, and then Gone with the Wind of the Letter. And I think it's a good wrap up. It is quick. The ending is quick.
I think this is our first point where we're going to butt heads on because I didn't. I think it just wrapped up way too quick, and it was just like. You know, because stay gold, essentially what Johnny's meaning is, which this was beautifully done, is that you got that classic 80s thing where Ralph Macchio's head starts floating. And it's quite sad because in the letter he says, you know, stay gold, I mean, always admire sunsets because Ponyboy looks at sunsets in ways boys don't. And just to see the beauty in the world, which some people see as naive, but
they're teenagers.
Johnny's saying to keep hold of that and always see the beauty in the world, which is beautiful. And he says, and then there's this really heartbreaking bit where he says, please tell Dally to watch the sunset, but which we've missed. Dally actually.
Yeah, so Dally dies.
In grief over Johnny dying, he takes his unloaded heater and
because he robs the pharmacy because he's looking for stuff to mend his wounds, but he is just so distraught by Johnny's death that he points the gun at the doctor. Pretty much he goes on a rampage, and then it's ultimately suicide by cop.
But he gets chased down by the cops, and he pulls the gun on them. Yeah,
and he's as the greasers are running towards him, being like, "Dally, don't!" and then he gets shot in front of them. So it's just this awful concoction
like the bullets
of death.
Are just going through him and his body's flipping around.
Ripping him apart. It's awful. And then the fact that they see that in front of them, what
Ponyboy needed.
Oh man, it's so rough.
Like the last 10 hours of all of these events happening in sequence was just like
insane.
It's like rumble, Johnny dead.
Dally dead.
Ponyboy
getting this
passing
letter.
Out. It was and then he sort of in the book struggles to acclimatize back to school and his life after
there is a big extended part of the book towards the end.
With the trial and then that. And then so basically his English teacher who supports him, who's not in the movie at all, he sort of says you need to write this essay, and Ponyboy gets inspired by the events of his life and sits down at his desk and
which
starts
the movie
to
opens
write.
with. The movie opens with that moment.
I feel like that worked better in the book because then he starts to write, I stepped out of the light of the movie theater into the light. Yeah. And it just is a cleaner feel. But then in the movie, he's like, I'm going to write a book now.
Yes, totally. It does. There's no purpose behind it.
If you knew Ponyboy as a character, yes, he likes to read, but he's not someone who is at that point where he's like a recreational writer.
Totally. I like, part of me, I'm happy. The reason I love the last half hour is because I think it's a good climax for the film. I do agree that where the book goes after the rumble, after Dally's death, like I said, with the trial included in that, and then the English teacher, I like the epilogue feel of it. But for me, the movie, I think, closes out so strong despite its rough first hour. Like, I think it really rounds it up quite well. And I felt the emotion. I think it ends on a high relatively with the as sad of a high. The brothers
get to stay together.
Totally, yeah. The brothers get to stay together, and I just think the note getting read out and and Ponyboy's reaction to that, I think emotionally fits well with it. But I like where the book goes afterwards. Like, I see what you mean, that like comparatively it does feel firstly rushed because they take out two major key moments of it there. But like I said earlier, the physicality of the rumble is so well done in the movie.
They killed
the
it in the
rumble
movie.
is
They did.
great in the movie.
Yeah.
And Johnny's death is so sad in the film.
It's really sad. It's just Ralph.
That's Ralph.
So cute.
That's Ralph. He is so goddamn good at
and we both
pulling
love
the
Cobra
heartstrings.
Kai, so it was really nice.
That's
to see
true.
him.
Yeah, it's good to see him back at his roots. Even just like the whole theatrical dramatization of the rumble when it rains, the rain starts coming down, and then they're all covered in mud and punching. And I wrote a little note like Tom Cruise still doing his own stunts, even with The Outsiders. He's obviously leveled it up a little bit since then, but
yeah, he is barely in it.
He's in like three scenes.
The character's not in the book much, but Steve is essentially Soda Pop's best friend.
And they work together at the gas station.
Yeah, and Ponyboy doesn't feel that Steve likes him because he thinks Ponyboy's always tagging along with
Totally.
Soda Pop.
Yeah.
And Ponyboy's kind of like, Soda Pop invited me. It's not like I asked to come. And, there's a bit of a biff, but that's not really
It's not really in the movie a lot. No, not at all.
It's just like Tom.
It's just like Tom being Tom. But I mean, is there anything else you wanted to add about the story? Anything we haven't covered? There is one line I'll say, speaking of Johnny's death, that when the scene before he dies, and he's coming to grips with the fact he's going to die, and he says 16 years is just not long enough, man. And you go, far out.
It'd be all right if I'd seen more, but when we went to that old church, that was the first time I'd ever left our neighborhood. Our neighborhood, Nick.
Brutal.
And he's just got
brutal
these
in the
big
book.
brown eyes.
It is brutal in the movie.
And then they say, your mum's here to visit you. And
and
he's
he doesn't.
so
That's right.
upset that he passes out.
Yeah. Well, in the movie, they're like, he doesn't want to see his mum. He's like, no, I don't want to see her. And then, is it in the movie as well, or the bit with 2-Bit tells her to go away?
That's not in the movie.
That's
I think it's in the book.
That's the book.
2-Bit also. See, all the boys get more of a time to shine
totally,
in the book, whereas in the movie, it's really
2-Bit tells Johnny's mum that he doesn't want to see her. Yeah, and she loses it. She loses her shit in the hospital.
She's a crazy hoe.
So she's a crazy hoe.
I was like, I am a feminist. It doesn't sound like it.
But when
you're
crazy.
so mean to your son, it's like, oh, I can't stand you. Really in the movie. What it comes down to me is that there's a shift from being about all the boys with a focus on the three brothers to being about Ponyboy, Johnny, and Dally.
Dally, yeah.
Which Dally, it does have a big part in the book, but it's more spread out.
It's a lot more spread out, whereas I feel like he has a lot more of a presence in the film. Totally. So we're here now. The question, which I think has been answered.
Everyone's going to be so shocked by my answer.
Georja Malt, The Outsiders, what was better, the film or the book?
It was the book.
Yeah. So.
Oh, you just say the movie to annoy me. I don't know.
So. Talking about the original version of the film, the book is better. I absolutely think the book is better because the movie isn't amazing. The movie is good. It is really good. I understand why it has a cult following, but there is a lot of issues narratively with how they tell the story that when I read the book, I was like, I'm a lot more intrigued in these characters. I like the context. I like the subtext. It makes it feel more full. The complete novel version of the film, which we didn't discuss too much, but the complete novel, we'll give it a run for its money.
Okay, I'm interested to see it.
I still think the book's better. I will consider this the book, The Outsiders, is better than the film. Which takes a lot for me to say. I'm going to need to take another month off this podcast before we do another episode to really come to terms with what I've said.
I feel like you're going to do some Googling for our next one. Be like, what movie adaptation is better than the book?
What movie is the best movie ever? I was like, fight this one, Georgia. But I agree. I think the book is brilliant. I don't think I would have ever read this book if we hadn't have done, and not out of like any sort of, ignorance to it. Like it would have just been not a book that I would have picked up because it's not a movie that I run back to and watch all the time. Yeah. It's so weird because I recently bought the film, but not for this podcast.
Oh,
I was like, because I saw it was like a restored version. I was like, it's a classic film. So I'm glad that we did it for the show. It gave me an excuse to watch it again. So the movie's fine. The last half hour is great, but the book is just brilliant. Absolutely brilliant book. But that is the show. That is the another episode in the hatch. Is that the phrase? I don't know. Down the hatch. In the bag. I'm like Johnny. I don't read good.
R.I.P.
R.I.P. Rest in peace, Johnny. Rest in peace, Dally.
Do we know what we're doing next month, or we're yet again coming on here unorganized?
Yet again, do you know what? about
Communication is key.
15 minutes before we recorded, I was looking at the bookcase. I'm like, should I pick the next one now? And I was like, no, I'll take a little bit of time because I've got 3 in my head that I want to do, but I'm like, I don't know which one I want to do. So,
well, I can't wait to find out what they are. Don't tell me the day of.
I'll tell you a week before we've got to record, and we'll figure it out then. But thank you all for listening. Obviously, I'll thank you all for watching on the YouTubes. If you can subscribe, leave a comment on the video, whether you liked The Outsiders book or the film better. On the podcast, Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, pretty much anywhere you can listen to us talking, you will find us. You just got to look a little and you will find us.
And don't forget, stay gold.
Stay gold, all the pony boys and gals out there. And we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thanks, Georgia, for coming along.
No worries. Thanks, everyone.
See you on the next episode.